I work at a small rundown diner off Route 24, just outside of a forgotten town called Sycamore Ridge. It's the kind of place that no one really talks about, but everyone passing through stops to eat at, if only because it's the only thing for miles. It's got a new name, Sunset Diner, though I've always wondered if it's more to cover up its past than anything else. I'm sure most people who stumble upon it aren't aware that the diner hasn't always been here. It's as if the place just showed up one day, half forgotten as though it never really belonged. Why do I work here? Well, it's simple. Things didn't turn out how I imagined. I had big plans like most people in their 20s do, but somewhere along the way those dreams fell apart. And now I'm here, slinging hash browns and bacon at a faded counter in a place that feels like it hasn't seen a new face in decades. It's the kind of job you take when you don't really know where else to go. When your world shrinks down to the daily grind of greasy spatulas and lukewarm coffee. It's not that the diner is horrible. It's just small. Lonely, even. Most of the customers are old regulars who come in, grab a seat, order the usual, and keep their eyes glued to the window as if they're waiting for something or someone to appear. I've gotten used to the strange rhythm of it all. Here, we do things a little differently, like the way we keep everything simple, even though we know it's not perfect. The coffee's always lukewarm, the eggs are scrambled just a bit too much, and the bread's never as toasted as it should be. But for some reason, the people who come here love it. They don't need anything fancy. I don't ask too many questions. I just follow the rules, even the strange unwritten ones. Like how no one talks too much to the customers. You're not supposed to try and engage them beyond the order and the bill. Keep things casual, keep it polite, but never too friendly. You know how it is. People come in here for one reason. They want to be alone. They just want their meal, their space, and their thoughts. The pay isn't half bad either. Way better than any other job in Sycamore Ridge. While other places offer just above minimum wage, Sunset Diner dishes out $45 an hour. And for that kind of money, I don't mind cleaning up spilled coffee and sweeping the same floor every hour. It wasn't always this way. The owner of the diner, Ruby, a woman in her late 50s, runs the show with an iron fist. She's quiet, almost eerie, but she's always been fair with me. Ruby doesn't make small talk. She gets straight to the point and doesn't waste any words. I don't ask her why she pays so much or why the diner feels different compared to others. I've learned that asking questions around here only gets you one answer. Follow the rules or leave. It's simple, but I guess that's how Ruby likes it. The other night, something happened. It was slow, as usual, and I was cleaning the counter when I noticed someone sitting at the far end. He hadn't walked in through the door. I hadn't heard him come in, but there he was, sitting alone in a corner booth, perfectly still. He didn't order right away, just sat there with his hands folded in front of him, his gaze fixed on the far window. He looked like someone who was waiting for something, someone who had all the time in the world. At first, I thought maybe he was just another one of those tired travelers who pulled in for a quick meal before continuing on their journey. But there was something off about him. His clothes were a bit too nice for this kind of place. Suit jacket, a white shirt that still looked crisp, despite the hours he'd been sitting there. He wasn't looking for food. He was looking for something else. Maybe I was imagining things, but his presence felt off. Ruby didn't like customers like him, and by the way she walked toward me, I knew she knew exactly what was going on. Her hand gripped my arm with surprising force, enough to make me flinch. "Listen up," she whispered, her voice sharp and low. "That man over there? You don't talk to him. You don't approach him. You don't even look at him." Her words hung in the air like a warning. I glanced toward the man again. He hadn't moved. His eyes didn't shift from the window. Ruby's grip tightened. "You don't serve him. Just leave him alone." I tried to ignore the unease settling in my stomach. Who was he? Why was he here? As the night stretched on, I found myself watching the man from a distance. There was something unnerving about the way he sat there, waiting. I could feel his eyes on me even when I wasn't looking at him. The silence between us grew heavy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew I was watching him. The evening wore on, but the man never moved. Ruby stayed behind the counter, keeping an eye on him, her face tight with concentration. As my shift came to a close, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. Who was this man? Why did Ruby act like she knew him, like she was afraid of him? I had to know more, but I didn't dare ask Ruby any questions. Not after the look she gave me. Weeks went by, and the man would show up regularly. once a month like clockwork. Sometimes I'd try to sneak a question to Ruby, asking who he was, where he came from, or what he wanted. But all I ever got was a cold, "I don't know," followed by a sharp, "If you're scared, you can leave." I didn't leave, though, not yet. One day, Ruby was sick, and I was left in charge of the diner for a few hours. It was a strange kind of freedom, almost too much for me to handle. As I wiped down the tables, I saw him. He was there, sitting in his usual spot, staring blankly at the window. This time, there was no one around to stop me. Something in me told me this was the moment to finally ask him. I had to know. "Excuse me, sir," I called across the diner, my voice shaking a little. "What brings you here today?" He turned slowly, his head tilting slightly, like he had been waiting for me to speak. "I'm sorry, dear," he said with a calm smile. "I'm afraid I didn't quite hear you. Can you come over here and ask me again?" His voice was nothing like I expected. It was smooth, soft, even kind. I stepped closer, still nervous but more curious than ever. "What brings you here?" I asked again, this time louder. He smiled, that same calm, patient smile. "I'm not sure," he said, "but I've been waiting for a while. Could you take my order?" Something in his voice sent a chill down my spine, but I tried to brush it off. I let the conversation end there, walking back to the counter to serve the rest of the customers. As always, he disappeared without a sound. No bell, no footsteps, just gone. A few weeks later, I found out why he was called the Wandering Man. I had overheard Ruby speaking with an agent, one of those people who showed up from time to time in dark suits. He was asking her about the man, and I heard Ruby say, "We've been dealing with him for years. He's not just a customer." The agent's voice grew hard. "What do you mean?" Ruby paused, looking down at her hands. "The man who sits in the corner. He's not from here. He doesn't belong here. He never has." I didn't know what to make of it. What was he? Why was he drawn to this diner? Why did Ruby act like she was afraid of him? Then, one night, it happened. He walked in during my shift, but something was different. His demeanor had changed. He didn't sit quietly. He walked right up to the counter, his eyes glinting with a strange, unsettling excitement. "I've been watching you," he said with that same calm smile. "I know you've been wondering." I froze, unable to speak. "You've been curious about me," he continued, leaning in closer. "And I've been waiting for you to ask." Before I could react, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box, setting it gently on the counter. "This is for you," he said, and then he was gone. I opened the box slowly, unsure of what I'd find. Inside was a note, neatly written in childish handwriting, that read, "I brought him back, just like you wished." And there, lying in the box, was Malcolm's severed head. I could hardly breathe. My hands trembled as I set the box back on the counter, the gruesome sight before me searing into my mind. I wanted to scream, to run, to throw the box out the door and pretend none of it had ever happened. But I couldn't. The diner felt strangely quiet, like the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something. My mind raced. Malcolm, the new guy, the eager one who wanted to prove himself. He had disappeared without a trace a few days ago, just like the others. Ruby had been unusually quiet about it, though. She wouldn't look me in the eye, and now I knew why. I could feel the weight of the box, as if it was some sort of curse handed down by the man who was, apparently, more than just a wandering stranger. I glanced toward the door, half expecting him to walk back in, to claim the box, or worse, to return with another grim gift. But the diner remained still, the usual hum of the neon lights above and the faint chatter of the few customers blending into an eerie silence. It was as if time itself had paused, holding its breath for what would come next. The events of the past few weeks, the oddness, the strange atmosphere surrounding the diner, all of it started to make sense in a way that terrified me. I had wondered for so long who the Wandering Man was, what his presence meant. But now, with the head of a coworker sitting in front of me, I was no longer curious. I didn't want answers anymore. I just wanted to get out. But where could I go? The world outside this place had always felt just as empty and endless as the diner itself. It was always the same. People passed through, left their marks, and moved on, never realizing that once you entered, you were trapped in its pull. The diner had its rules, its patterns, like the Wandering Man appearing every month, the staff rotating in and out, and the agents showing up when things got out of hand. There was no escaping it. As I stared at the note, a sick realization began to sink in. I wasn't just a witness to this strange world. I was part of it. And the man wasn't done with me. I didn't know how long I stood there, paralyzed, staring at the box, the reality of my situation sinking deeper into my bones. The customers had stopped talking. The diner had become a strange, suffocating place, like a spider's web where I was stuck, unable to break free. Suddenly the door opened again. My heart skipped a beat as I looked up. It was the same tall, slender figure from before. The wandering man was back, but this time he wasn't sitting in the corner. He walked straight up to me, eyes locked on mine with an intensity I hadn't seen before. He smiled, but it wasn't kind. It was something else, something far more unsettling. "Good evening," he said, his voice calm, almost too calm. "I see you've met the new game." I wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come. His presence seemed to smother the very air around me. "You've been so curious," he continued, his tone now laced with amusement. "And now you're part of it all. No going back, you know. You'll understand everything soon enough." I opened my mouth to protest, to ask what he meant, but he raised a hand, silencing me. "Don't worry, I won't hurt you. At least not right away," he said, his smile widening, revealing too many teeth. "But you've seen too much. You've crossed the line. You've been chosen to stay." My blood ran cold. Chosen? What did that mean? Was I to become like Ruby, like the others who had disappeared? Was I the next one he would pull into his twisted game? Before I could form any more thoughts, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out another small box. This time, it wasn't as neatly wrapped. It looked almost rushed, as if he had grown tired of the charade. "This is for you," he said, placing the box on the counter in front of me, just like last time. I didn't want to open it, didn't want to know what it contained, but I had no choice. I opened the box slowly, my heart racing, my breath shallow. Inside was another note. It simply read, "You're next." A chill ran through me. He stepped back from the counter, his eyes gleaming with something I couldn't describe. Something dark, almost primal. The agents in the diner watched from their tables, scribbling their notes, their eyes never leaving us. They had seen this before. They were waiting for it. And I realized then that they weren't just watching him. They were watching me. I was part of the cycle now. I had been chosen, not by fate, but by something far more sinister. The man turned to leave, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The agents didn't move. They didn't make a sound. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask them what was going on, how they could just let this happen, but I couldn't find my voice. As the wandering man reached the door, he turned back to me one last time. "Don't worry," he said, his voice softening. "You'll be fine. For now." With that, he walked out of the diner, vanishing into the night as if he had never been there at all. The agents followed him silently, leaving the room just as empty as it had been before. But now nothing felt the same. I wasn't just a server anymore. I wasn't just working at a diner. I was part of something bigger, something I couldn't escape. The bell on the door jingled softly, signaling the end of my shift. But for the first time in my life, I didn't want to leave. I couldn't leave, because no matter how far I went, I knew I'd always be watching the door, waiting for him to return. And I knew, deep down, that when he came back I would be ready, whether I wanted to be or not. Moving into my first real apartment felt like the beginning of something fresh. I'd spent most of my 20s in shared houses and cramped rooms, but this one was mine, a small studio on the second floor of an old building in the heart of the city. The walls were thin, but it didn't matter. I was used to noise, and the hum of the air conditioning was a comfort in itself. I thought I'd be all right. It would be my space to make my own. The first thing I bought, after a second-hand couch and a cheap coffee table, was a mattress. I was tired of cheap beds and bad sleep, of waking up with aching bones and a sore neck. I spent days searching, reading reviews, comparing brands, and finally found it. A thick, plush mattress that promised comfort beyond my expectations. I knew it was expensive, but I convinced myself it would be worth it. It was the best purchase I had ever made. The mattress was perfect in every way, soft but firm, with just enough support to make me feel weightless. The first night I slept on it, I felt like I'd finally found the place I could truly rest. No more tossing and turning, no more waking up with back pain. For the first time in ages, I slept through the night, my body sinking into the softness, and I woke up feeling genuinely refreshed. It was one of those moments where you realize how much you'd taken something so simple for granted. I started to think about how we all forget the little things that make life comfortable. The bed, for example, so basic, yet so essential. You don't think about how much it affects your day until something goes wrong. When your bed is bad, your whole life feels off, doesn't it? The aches, the bad sleep, the frustration, it all piles up and it can take away your energy for the whole day. But with a good bed? Well, that's a whole different story. But things didn't stay perfect for long. It wasn't even a week before I started noticing something strange. One night, after a particularly grueling day at work, I collapsed onto the mattress, exhausted. I hadn't even bothered to shower, just wanting to rest. But as I settled into the bed, something poked my back. It wasn't a sharp pain, more like something pressing into me, something moving. I shifted and thought it might be one of the springs. I rubbed my back, trying to ease the discomfort, but when I moved again, the feeling intensified. It wasn't a spring. No, it felt like a finger, a real finger, pushing against me from the inside of the mattress. I froze. My heart raced, and I sat up in an instant, my body stiff with shock. The mattress felt normal under my hands, but I had just felt something I couldn't explain. I turned on the light, my eyes scanning the bed, but there was nothing to see. No hole. No sign of anything unusual. Everything seemed fine. I was about to brush it off as some kind of bizarre dream or a trick of my tired mind. But as I lay back down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I kept telling myself that it was just a figment of my imagination, that it didn't mean anything. But the next night, it happened again. It was after another exhausting day. The weight of the world seemed to settle on my shoulders as I collapsed into bed, desperate for a good night's sleep. I pulled the covers over me and tried to relax, but there it was again, the feeling. This time, it wasn't just one finger. It was multiple, pressing against my back, crawling slowly like it was searching for something. It wasn't painful, but it was unsettling. I could feel them move under the sheets, pushing against me, retreating, and then coming back again. I jumped out of bed, my heart pounding, and I turned on the light, scanning the mattress. But there was nothing there. Nothing but the bed that had become my sanctuary just days before. I felt stupid. I stood there in the middle of the room, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. My hands shook as I looked at the bed. What the hell was happening? I couldn't explain it. It didn't make sense. My mind raced with possibilities, but none of them felt right. Then, as if on cue, the sensation started again. This time I didn't hesitate. I yanked the covers off and dug my fingers into the mattress, expecting to find some kind of hole or tear. But instead, there was nothing. The mattress felt just as soft and firm as it always had. I pulled at the seams, searching for any signs of damage, but everything was intact. Then, something happened that made my blood run cold. I felt a finger emerge from the bed, right under my hand. I froze again, unable to move as the finger slowly pressed against my palm. It was warm, soft, too soft. And then it retreated back into the mattress, leaving no trace behind. I stumbled back, my mind in overdrive, trying to process what had just happened. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or run out of the apartment. But I couldn't do any of that. I stood there, shaking, looking at the bed that now felt like a stranger. What was this? Why was this happening to me? I didn't want to be alone anymore. I grabbed my phone, but my hands were so shaky I could barely hold it. I thought about calling someone, but who would believe me? Who would even understand what I was experiencing? In the end, I crawled back into bed. I don't know why. Maybe because I didn't have anywhere else to go. Or maybe because deep down, I was hoping it was all just a dream, a horrible, twisted dream. But when I woke up the next morning, the bed was normal again. Nothing was wrong. It was as if the night had never happened. The bed was still perfect, still soft, still the same. Days went by. I convinced myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. Work was stressful, and maybe I was overworked. I'd gotten plenty of sleep, so I tried to forget about it. But each night, when I crawled into bed, I couldn't help but think about what had happened. And every night I felt the fingers again. One night, the sensation was worse than before. The fingers weren't just poking me, they were grasping, pulling. I felt them dig into my back, as if they were trying to hold on. The panic surged through me again. I jumped out of bed, and that's when I saw it. The mattress was covered in what looked like tiny, thin, white fingers, like something out of a nightmare. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed a pair of scissors from my nightstand and started cutting. I hacked at the bed, slashing the fabric where the fingers had been. The mattress was soon covered in what looked like dark stains. I didn't know what it was. Blood? Oil? But it didn't matter. I had to stop them. I had to destroy whatever it was that was inside the mattress. The fingers shrank back as I cut, retreating into the fabric like they knew I was trying to hurt them. I kept cutting, tearing at the fabric until it was a shredded mess. When I finally stopped, the room was quiet again. I stared at the mattress, covered in the blood-like stains. I was breathing hard, my chest rising and falling as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. But the mattress healed. It was as if nothing had ever occurred. The bloodstains vanished, the holes sealed up, and the mattress was smooth and untouched. I couldn't believe my eyes. I left the apartment for a while. I slept on the couch in the living room, not daring to touch the bed again. But I knew that sooner or later, I would have to face it again. Days turned into weeks. I still couldn't shake the fear I felt every time I looked at the mattress. It was like a dark secret hanging over me. But life went on, and I kept working, kept trying to live normally. I even started to think maybe I was just losing my mind. Then, I got the news. My mother passed away suddenly. I was devastated. I didn't know how to cope with it, so I just kept going through the motions, not knowing what to do. One evening, as I sat in my room, still reeling from the shock, I remembered something. I went to the small jewelry box she had kept on her dresser. I took her wedding ring off her finger. My hands were shaking as I held it, the gold cool against my fingertips. I couldn't explain why, but I knew what I had to do. I took her finger, the one with the ring, and placed it on the mattress. I left it there, just like that. I didn't think about it much. I had to bury her the next day, and my mind was clouded with grief. But that night, when I climbed into bed, I felt it again, the fingers. This time, it wasn't the usual sensation. It was different. The touch was gentle, familiar, comforting even. It was as if the bed itself had changed, as if it was no longer just a mattress, but a place where memories and emotions converged. I felt the fingers move across my back again, but this time I didn't panic. I didn't jump out of bed. Instead, I closed my eyes and let the feeling wash over me. I knew then, without a doubt, that it was my mother's finger. Her presence was unmistakable. The sensation, soft and familiar, wrapped me in warmth, and for a brief moment, I wasn't so alone in my grief. It was as if her love had somehow reached beyond death and settled in the fibers of the mattress. When I opened my eyes, I saw it. The finger moving slowly but deliberately across the bed, the wedding ring gleaming in the dim light. I had expected it to be an unsettling experience, but instead, I felt peace. A kind of quiet acceptance washed over me. She was still here, still with me in some way, and I could feel that love even in the strangest of circumstances. The fingers retreated back into the mattress, just like they had before. The bed seemed to return to normal, but I knew something had changed. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't terrified of what I couldn't understand. I had come to terms with the fact that some things defy explanation. Maybe the mattress was haunted, or maybe it was something else entirely. But it didn't matter. I had felt her again. That was enough for me. The days that followed were filled with a quiet kind of grief, but also an understanding that my mother's love had somehow endured. Each night I felt her finger moving across the mattress, a small reminder that she was never truly gone. I tried to tell myself that it was just my mind playing tricks, that I was projecting my grief onto something inanimate, but I couldn't deny the truth. It was her. I knew it was her, and I wasn't scared anymore. Weeks went by, and life, though difficult, continued. I couldn't get the image of my mother's finger out of my mind, nor could I ignore the strange connection between us that seemed to exist through the mattress. The sensation grew stronger over time, more consistent, and each time it happened, I felt more at peace with the world around me. But then, one evening, something changed. I was coming home from work, exhausted as usual. The weight of the day hung on my shoulders, and all I wanted was to collapse into bed. I walked into my apartment, threw my keys onto the counter, and made my way to the bedroom. I had gotten used to the routine by now, the quiet, the sensation of my mother's finger moving over me when I lay down. But that night, when I climbed into bed, there was nothing. No fingers. No warmth. The bed was eerily still. I turned over, expecting to feel the familiar touch, but nothing came. I lay there for what felt like hours trying to fall asleep, but the bed felt cold, distant, and completely foreign. It was as if whatever had been happening before had suddenly stopped. I felt a knot form in my stomach, a deep unease settling in. Had I imagined it all? Was I just fooling myself? No, I couldn't believe that. I had felt it. I had felt her presence, and I knew that it was real. But now, as I lay there in the silence, I felt an emptiness where there had once been comfort. The next few nights were the same. The bed felt empty. The fingers never came back, and I was left lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what had happened. Was my mother's spirit gone? Had the mattress, whatever strange force it was, decided it was time for me to move on? Or had I somehow lost my connection to her? Days turned into weeks, and the feeling of abandonment grew stronger. I stopped sleeping in the bed altogether. It felt wrong to even go near it. The absence of the touch, the absence of that strange comfort, left me hollow inside. I couldn't explain it, but I felt like something important had been taken from me. I decided to move on. I packed up the apartment, telling myself that it was time to leave. I wasn't running from the memories, but I couldn't bear the empty feeling that had consumed me. I sold the mattress. I gave it away, along with everything else in the apartment. I moved to a new place, far away, where I could start fresh. But no matter where I went, no matter how many times I tried to forget, the memory of that mattress and the fingers that had once brought me comfort stayed with me. The sensation never fully left my mind, and it haunted me for years. Every so often, when I lay down to sleep, I would feel something strange, something that made my skin crawl. I never knew if it was just my imagination or if something else was at work, but I would always smile, remembering the peace I had once felt, knowing that somehow, some way, my mother had reached out to me. It's been years now. I've moved on. I have a new life, new memories, new comforts, but the feeling is still there. I don't know if it was the mattress, if it was my grief, or if it was something else entirely. But I've learned to live with it. The other night I dreamt of the old apartment. I was lying on the bed waiting for the fingers to return. In the dream, they never came. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I was just content, knowing that my mother had been there with me, even in the most unexpected of ways. And then, just as the dream was fading, I felt it again. A soft touch, a gentle press, moving slowly across my back. It wasn't just a memory. It wasn't just a dream. It was real. I could feel her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace.